The snow came early that year, drifted like ghost breath along the cottonwood groves, and hushed the land into stillness. Nina didn't mind the cold. It kept strangers away. Mostly. Her cabin, squat and wind-bitten, leaned against the shoulder of a hill like an old dog. The woodshed was stacked, the rifle loaded. Winter, she'd learned, was about preparation. Trust nothing else. But that morning, when she rode the western fence line to check the trap snares, the crows told her something wasn't right. Not their usual squabbling. This was sharper, urgent. She slid from the saddle, boots sinking into thin-crusted snow, and followed their cries down toward the ravine. That's when she saw him, half covered in mud and frost. The man lay on his side like something discarded. A blood trail marked his arrival, dark and nearly dry. One boot was missing. The other dangled from a leg that didn't bend right. His shirt had stuck to his skin with dried sweat and worse things. Nina crouched, her braids stiff with cold, and pressed 2 fingers to his throat. There was a pulse. Barely. She should have walked away. She'd done it before. Plenty of times. Men stumbled out here thinking the land owed them safety, and the land proved otherwise. She owed him nothing. Still, his breath came in shallow wheezes, each one like it hurt to live. And there was something in the way his hand curled near his chest, like he'd been holding on to something once. Something worth the pain. She cursed under her breath. Then she fetched the mule. It took most of her strength to get him across the saddle. The ride back was slow, bones jarring over frozen ruts. She didn't talk to him. What would be the point? But once or twice, he murmured something through chapped lips. Names. Or maybe prayers. The words didn't matter. The voice did. He sounded like a man who'd run too far for too long. Back at the cabin, she built the fire high, stripped him of what clothes she dared, and poured boiled water over blood-caked rags. The bullet wound at his side, had scabbed badly, black at the edges. Infection, maybe worse. She packed it with willow bark and sage ash. She sang under her breath, something her grandmother used to hum when tending the sick. Not because she believed it would help, because the silence felt too wide without it. He didn't wake, not fully. Days passed in flickers, snow thickening outside, firewood dwindling, the rhythm of healing and hope and hesitation. She learned his face by firelight, jawline like a cliffside, eyes sunken but restless beneath their lids, a scar along his collarbone, a tattoo on his arm, half-faded, a star inside a horseshoe. Once, during the fever, he sat bolt upright and grabbed her wrist. "They're coming," he rasped, eyes wild. "I didn't light the fire. Wasn't me." She didn't pull away, just said, calm and low, "Ain't no one coming tonight, cowboy. Just snow." He let go. That night, she sat at the edge of her bedroll, rifle across her lap, watching him sleep. A thought had begun to grow in her, unwanted but stubborn. What kind of man had no name on his lips but guilt? On the 4th morning, the fire had burned low and the frost had crept inside the window panes. She stirred the stew, glancing toward the cot where he lay. But this time his eyes were open, bleary, bloodshot, but aware. She froze. "You're real?" he asked, voice dry as wind. "Some days," she said, "mostly when I've had coffee." He tried to sit up, winced, failed. "Where am I?" "My land." He looked around, blinking hard. "Cabin's yours. Has been for 5 winters. Nobody's taken it from me yet." She handed him a cup. "Drink. You've been out near a week." He sipped, coughed. Then his eyes found hers again and stayed. "You should have left me there. Thought about it. So why didn't you?" She didn't answer right away. Stirred the stew again, slower this time. Didn't feel like digging a grave. A faint smirk cracked his chapped lips. "Wouldn't blame you. I ain't worth much." "That true." He looked down into the cup. "Maybe." She set the ladle aside and moved closer. "Got a name?" He hesitated. Something shifted in his expression, like he weighed the cost of the truth. "Calder," he said finally. "Just that. No last name. No place. No story." But she didn't press. "Not yet." "Well, Calder," she said, standing, "you bleed on my floor again and I'll charge you rent." As she walked outside to fetch more firewood, the wind curled around her like a whisper, colder than before. She looked up toward the tree-line where the crows had vanished, and the sky was bruising. Somewhere out there, something had chased that man to her door, and if it came looking again, she wasn't sure if she'd be ready or whose side she'd be on. But for now, she knew only this. The fevered man had a voice full of secrets, and she had offered him her fire, and neither of them, not yet, had asked why. Calder moved like a man borrowed from death, slow, deliberate, uncertain of his weight in the world. Each morning, he managed a little more, stacking kindling, chopping wood with a dull axe, limping to the creek to rinse blood-stiff rags. Nina watched him from the porch, rifle always within reach. She didn't trust easily, and she didn't offer more than she had to. But something in the way he moved, quiet, like he didn't want to stir the silence, made her curious. Men on the run usually stomped and shouted and took. Calder didn't ask for anything. He just worked. They ate in near silence. Nights were worst. He slept in fitful jolts, waking soaked with sweat, hand twitching toward an absent pistol. She let him believe she hadn't noticed, but she heard the way his breath caught when the wind banged the shutters, saw how his eyes darted toward the shadows in the corners of the cabin. One night, after supper beans and ash bread, Calder said, "This place, it's too quiet." Nina didn't look up. "You've been in too many loud ones, then." Loud places usually mean guns. Smoke. Screaming. He rubbed at the faded tattoo on his arm. Never did like silence after. Her fingers paused over the stitching in her lap. "You kill someone?" He met her eyes but didn't answer. The fire popped between them. "I did," she said, voice soft, measured. 3 winters ago. Man thought he could take what he wanted from a half-breed woman in the dark. He was wrong. Calder's throat moved, but still he said nothing. Not right away. Then, finally, some men deserve the bullet. Trouble is, the law don't always agree. She watched him a moment longer, then nodded once. That was the first truth he gave her. Days passed. The snow crusted into sharp ice along the ridges, and the wind lost its teeth for a time. Calder built a lean-to for the goats without being asked. He found a broken hinge on the barn door and fixed it with spare wire. Nina said nothing, but she brought him coffee without asking, poured it without ceremony, left the cup steaming beside his elbow. One afternoon, she found him by the fence line, watching the sky. "You see something?" she asked. "Nothing yet." He squinted westward. "Just got a feeling. Dust don't rise unless something stirs it. You think someone's tracking you?" He gave a slow nod. A man don't bleed his way across half a territory without drawing flies. She crossed her arms, coat cinched tight. "You gonna tell me who's looking?" "Not yet," he said. "Ain't sure you believe me." "I believed you were worth dragging in from the creek." Might as well finish the story. But he didn't. He just turned back to the hills, jaw tight, and said, "They're still far off." That night, curiosity gnawed at her. After he fell into one of his bone-deep sleeps, she slipped out to the barn. She'd noticed how careful he was with his satchel. Never left it in plain sight, always tucked high on the beams, away from rain, mice, and prying eyes. She climbed the ladder, fingers raw from cold, and pulled it down. Inside, a rust-stained handkerchief, a half-broken compass, 2 cartridges wrapped in oilcloth and a folded paper, brittle at the creases. She lit the lantern low and opened it. His name stared back at her in thick black ink. A wanted poster. Dead or alive. Charges. Arson, theft, murder. $10,000 for man called Calder Rusk. She stood there in the dark, hand trembling, mouth dry. He'd given her his name, but not the truth. She didn't wake him, didn't shout, just returned the satchel, replaced every item exactly, and walked out into the yard to stare at the stars until her bones went numb. The truth weighed heavy, but it wasn't heavy enough to crush the memory of the man who fixed hinges and shared coffee in silence. The next day, Calder didn't ask why she was quiet. He seemed to sense it. He kept his distance, worked the fire, fed the animals, all without a word. They were like 2 wolves circling something wounded between them, neither trusting, neither willing to strike first. Toward dusk, he finally said, "You ever run from something so long, you forget what was?" She didn't answer, just set down her knife and walked to the door. He followed her gaze to the horizon. 3 riders, far off, barely specks, but moving steady. "You recognize them?" she asked. "No," he said. Then after a pause, "But I know the shape of men who ride with purpose." "You gonna run?" His face hardened, eyes shaded under his hat. "No point. If they're here for me, they'll find me. And if they're not, then it's only a matter of time till someone is." She closed the door behind her, bolted it with the iron bar. Then she turned to him. "You sleep tonight. I'll keep watch." "You don't have to." "I know." She sat in the corner by the window, rifle across her knees, ears open to wind and hoofbeat. She didn't ask him to explain. Not yet, but she knew the answers were coming. The kind that burn before they heal. The kind that make you choose whether to open the door or aim the gun through it. And she wasn't sure what she'd do. Not yet. The riders came slow, like they had all the time in the world. 3 of them, dust-cloaked and tight-lipped, eyes sharp beneath their hats. They didn't ask for water, didn't tie their horses, just stood in the yard with the weight of men who believed the land owed them answers. Nina opened the cabin door with her rifle slung casual in one hand. Calder stood just behind the curtain, breathing shallow, a revolver holstered but hidden. "Evening, miss," the oldest rider said, gray at the temples and sun split around the mouth. "We're looking for someone." "Most folks out here are," Nina replied. "You think he's in my goat pen?" A flicker of amusement touched his lips. "Goes by Calder Rusk. Rode out of Deadwater 2 weeks back. Left a body and a burned saloon behind." Nina didn't blink. Never heard the name. The second man, bigger, with a scar running from jaw to collar, narrowed his eyes. "Mind if we take a look around?" "I do mind. Wouldn't want trouble." "Then I suggest you stay on your horses." The leader lifted a hand, easy, calming. "We're not law. Bounty contract's legal, though 10,000 says he's out here somewhere." Nina's voice stayed flat. 10,000 makes men see ghosts. The leader's gaze held hers a beat too long. Then he nodded toward the barn. "We'll camp by the rise yonder. Be gone by sunup. Just passing through." She didn't lower her rifle until they turned their backs and rode off slow, the way coyotes do when they're not done sniffing. Inside, Calder exhaled like he hadn't breathed for a full minute. "They knew." "They guess," she said, "but they'll come back." He stared at the door, jaw tight. They weren't bounty men. Not all of them. That old one, he used to ride with Renner. The judge. She turned to him. "The one from the poster?" Calder nodded, slow. Judge Renner ran dry wells like it was his kingdom. Held his own trials. Hanged folks for stealing chickens. Let murderers walk if they brought bribes. I was a deputy under his hand. Believed the badge meant something. And they burned a man alive, he said. Wrong man. I tried to stop it. Got shot for my trouble. Crawled out under cover of dark. When I came back, courthouse was gone. Burned down to its bones. So was the judge's house. You burn it. He looked at her for a long time, like maybe the truth was heavy enough to break something between them. Then he said, "No, but I didn't cry when it lit up." She didn't answer right away. She poured him coffee instead. Set it down with a soft clink. "They'll ride back tonight or tomorrow. You planning to run?" "I ain't run anymore," he said. "But I won't die for a lie, neither." They didn't speak the rest of that night, but the silence was different. Not empty, charged, like the space before a thunderclap. By morning, snow started falling again, quiet and slow, blanketing the land in hush. Calder spent the daylight checking rifles, oiling bolts, walking the property line with a hunter's eyes. Nina sharpened her knives, set extra wood by the hearth, fed the goats in silence. Around mid-afternoon, she saw smoke on a ridge, just a thin thread curling skyward. The riders were still there. That evening, she found Calder on the porch, staring into the dusk. "You remember that courthouse fire?" he asked. "I wasn't anywhere near dry wells," she said. "There was a child, Someone left her in the back room while the judge played cards. The blaze came fast. Whole damn town watched it burn. She looked at him. Did she make it out? I carried her, he said, through smoke so thick I couldn't see the stars. She was crying like the world was ending. Maybe it was. I gave her to a preacher and rode south. Figure if anyone deserved to live, it was her. Nina's voice dropped. You ever find her again? No. He looked down at his hands. Didn't want her to remember me like that. Silence settled between them, thick as snow on the roof. Then Nina said, what if the preacher gave her a name? What if she grew up in the high flats, built her own cabin, learned to trust her own damn hands? Calder turned his head, slow. You. She didn't smile. You never asked my full name. His face changed, and not in shock, but in something deeper, something breaking and rebuilding all at once. He opened his mouth to speak. Gunfire cracked through the stillness. The window behind them exploded. Calder dove low, dragged her with him. A bullet slammed into the porch beam, splintering it like dry bone. They're here, Nina hissed. They never left. Calder scrambled to the corner and threw open the loose floorboard where his rifle lay. He tossed her the shotgun. You take the back. Already covered, she said, cocking the weapon. More shots rang out. Glass shattered. The goats screamed from the pen. Nina fired once, twice. Scattershot blasts meant to scatter men. She saw movement in the snow, dark shapes flanking the cabin. They're trying to drive us out, Calder growled. Let's not give them the pleasure. The door burst inward on the third kick. Calder dropped the first man with a single shot. The second lunge, blade drawn, but Nina caught him clean in the ribs, buckshot tearing through cloth and silence. Then came the leader, Renner's man. Scarred, calm, rifle raised. But Calder was faster. He stepped into the light, weapon leveled. 10 years you hunted me. You burned the judge, the man sneered. I saved the child. Doesn't matter now. It does to me. The shot echoed across the valley, cutting clean to the snow glow. The man dropped. Silence fell again, raw and unholy. Calder turned, his shoulder bleeding. Nina caught him before he fell. She didn't ask if he was all right. She just whispered, You finally stopped running. He nodded, and you finally remembered. Together, they stood beneath the fractured doorway, firelight behind them, snowfall ahead, and a grave or two to dig before dawn. The snow didn't stop. By morning it had buried the blood, softened the footprints, and quieted the earth to a hush so deep it felt sacred. The cabin smelled of spent gunpowder and pine sap, of old smoke and newer wounds. Calder sat with his back against the hearth, his arm bandaged tight, blood blooming faintly through the cloth. Outside, the corpses lay stiff beneath tarps. Neither he nor Nina had spoken much since sunrise. Some things didn't need words to be understood. She poured coffee, hand steady, set his cup beside him. Same as she had on the first morning, he'd opened his eyes. He looked at it a moment, then looked at her. You could still turn me in, he said quietly. I could, she said, but I won't. You read the poster. You know what the world thinks I did. I know what I saw you do. He nodded once, slowly. And what was that? Protect what mattered. Face what hunted you. Stop running. He tried to smile, but it hurt. Feels strange. Being done. She sat across from him, her knees drawn close, eyes unreadable in the firelight. You're not done, she said. You're just not alone now. Later. They buried the men on the hill, beneath a line of cedar trees blackened by years of wind. Calder carved no names, just crosses. It felt wrong to give the dead more permanence than the living sometimes got. They burned the last of the wanted poster that night, let it curl in on itself, black edges glowing red, until it turned to smoke and memory. You ever think about going back? Nina asked, her voice low. Back where? Anywhere someone might know your name. I don't think I have a name there anymore, he said. Whatever's left of Calder Rusk is here. In this cabin. In the snow. She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. Weeks passed. Spring threatened the edges of the land. The snow melted, trickled in quiet streams down the hill. Calder's limp faded into a hitch. He fixed the barn roof, built a chicken run, learned the language of Nina's quiet glances. At night, they sat close by the fire, not lovers yet, but something more than strangers. One morning, she set a hand on her belly and said without looking at him, "I think the land remembered us." He turned slowly, caught her meaning, and for the first time since she'd pulled from the creek, he truly smiled. That spring, he wrote a letter. Didn't sign it with his name, just wrote the truth in plain words about a judge who used gallows like fences and a fire that freed more than it destroyed. He sent it west, to a newspaperman who'd once chased the scent of blood. He knew the law might come again, but if it did, it would have to reckon with more than a ghost. It would have to reckon with a man who'd been seen, forgiven, and chosen. Children from the high ridges came sometimes, half-bloods like Nina had been, born between wars and borders. Calder taught them to mend saddles, to shoot straight, to ride without breaking the earth beneath them. He never raised his voice, never raised a hand. Some said he used to be an outlaw. Others said he was a preacher in disguise. No one asked too hard. Some men are stories before they're truths, and some truths only live in the quiet between storms. One night, long after the fire had dimmed and the wind had settled, Nina lay with her head on Calder's chest, her fingers tracing the old scar on his collarbone. "You ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't found you?" He looked up at the timbered ceiling, then kissed the top of her head. "I think I'd still be bleeding," he said, "or already buried." She didn't say anything for a while. Then, "And if I hadn't known who you were, I would have told you eventually. You're a terrible liar, only when I care." She smiled into the dark, and he felt it like warmth. The land healed with them, slowly, unevenly, without ceremony. But it healed. The cabin no longer leaned. It stood firm. The wind no longer felt like a threat. It sang, and the man the world once hunted now moved without looking over his shoulder. Whatever name he'd lost, he had a new one here. Husband, father, home,